Let's Talk Development, Season 3, Episode 10.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Development, a podcast jointly hosted by CDPR and IGC. I'm Ayesha Hussain, and over the past 25 years, I've worked as a teacher, I've worked in administration, in curriculum development, evaluation and training. We are focusing today on a key topic. It's key to both national progress and individual and personal growth: education, technology, and the future of human potential. As technology changes fast and jobs evolve, we need to ask, what skills and abilities should education equip young people with for the 21st century? To explore this further, we were joined by Dr. Syed Turab Hussain, currently principal of Aitchison College. He has previously served as Associate Professor of Economics at the Lahore University of Management Sciences, where he also chaired the Economics Department for 9 years. Over the course of his career, he has taught at the University of Essex, authored numerous public policy reports and research papers, and co-authored Candles in the Dark: Successful Organizations in Pakistan's Weak Institutional Environment. Dr. Hussain holds a BA in Honours from the College of Worcester and an MA and PhD in Economics from the University of Essex. He is also an alumnus of Government College University and completed his schooling at Aitchison College, where he was a boarder for 8 years. Dr. Turab, it is a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You're most welcome. Now, turning to the topic at hand,
Yeah.
are we just focusing on grades and tests? Or are we helping students develop the skills to think, adapt, and to lead in a constantly changing world?
Okay, so I think the answer to your question has two parts. First, my experience at university and one of the top universities in Pakistan, that is LUMS.
Yes.
And now recently, I have the privilege and honor to lead Aitchison College, which was my alma mater. So I think by and large you're right. The emphasis, unfortunately, is on grades.
Yes.
At the level of the school, talking about CIEs, A levels, which, by the way, is a very small number. If you look at Pakistan, around 50,000 students across the country sit for their A levels, for example. So that's really, really small. But in that, and I'm sure the same is in metric and FSC and so on, that there is this obsession with grades. And the reason is because the world out there has become very extremely competitive.
Yes.
So for school students to get into good universities in Pakistan or to apply abroad, it is a challenge. So it's a competitive world. In the last 20, 30 years, the entire landscape of education has changed.
Yes.
So that in some sense pushes them to be grade oriented. Although it's not the first best option we would like them to be deep thinkers, to have analytical minds and so on, and we'll talk about it. At the level of university also we see the trend, because clearly they're coming from school and the same sort of thinking is also, or the same motivation or incentives are also there in university. So at LUMS we saw a lot of grade orientation. So they come to you after the end of the course, after a midterm or an exam, they want their A stars and A grades and so on. And there are very, very few students who come to you after a lecture or after a course and say that, yes, we didn't get a good grade, but we really enjoyed the content. Although in good universities in US, UK, Europe, and also places like LUMS, amongst the faculty and the way the curriculum is structured, there's greater emphasis on the content. So we want them to get most of the course and not be that grade oriented.
Yes.
And carrying this conversation forward, what we see is in later on in life, in your professional careers, really the correlation between how good you do in school or how good you do in university is not that much, which is sort of perceived by a lot of students.
Absolutely.
So there are many other factors which play a role in your success in life.
Absolutely, yes. It's character building, I think, which seems to be missing, really. Even in institutions, because I feel that even schools, because I've taught at a school, there is such emphasis on statistics what I'm trying to say is, we have a big board put up where we have that many A stars, that many admissions. But in this whole mess, I think we just forget the individual.
So absolutely. I mean, one simple way of looking at it is grades are measurable. How do you measure things like character or personality development?
Absolutely, yeah.
But if you take a step back and look at, well, what's the objective of a good education? So we're talking about both schooling and undergraduate. For masters and PhD, that's specialization. That's more of a particular skill development. But if you look at the major objectives, they're essentially, you can say they're two. One is that it hones your cognitive skills. You become an analytical thinker. You can look at the world from different perspectives. You write well. I mean, you can communicate effectively, so you become articulate. You have your own individual expression. And you have the ability to look at the world's problems from different perspectives. And you become an avid or voracious reader. That should be the objective.
Oh, yeah.
So that is one. The second, going to yours, which I think is the primary one, is that in the end of the day, you want to become, or you want schools and colleges to make sure that their students become good human beings. They should have good moral character. They should be honest. They should have a deep sense of integrity. They should be good citizens of the state.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so I feel that, cognitive, social and emotional, these are the three domains that need to be addressed in every lesson,
Absolutely.
I feel.
Absolutely.
Because like you're saying, cognitively, I mean, they have to do well.
And they're
to
not
survive.
mutually exclusive.
They're
Because,
not, yes.
if you have a solid education,
Yes.
where your skills are being developed, at the same time, it's integrated with sort of character development also.
Absolutely, you're right.
So-
Yes. So coming to technology. So
Yeah.
in classrooms today, are we primarily teaching students how to think deeply or how to locate and compile information efficiently?
Again, I think I would, unfortunately, it's information compiling.
Yeah.
Education has become in schools, not in universities. I mean, in your good universities, you actually teach them to think deeply. Liberal arts programs particularly, wherever they are. But in schools, and in the context of Pakistan, again, private schools, OA levels, and similar with public schools, and with sort of your metric and FSE system, it's become very formulaic. So, they've broken the code, so to speak. So if you look at the number of A stars and A's, they proliferate really. And students tend to choose subjects which are high scoring
Yes.
or in which they... And that's also a tendency why we see a lot of students, and it's great. I mean, the fact that they're doing STEM, excellent. But they should need to do it for the right reasons.
Yes.
Not just necessarily to get a high grade, or things like business, accounting, where they feel that, getting a high grade is easier. And then less emphasis on social sciences and humanities, which are subjects which make you think deeply, make you write. So your ability to write well really develops if you take those. So the demand for those is less
Yes.
compared to these other subjects.
Bilkul. Because I taught literature, and I know
Yeah.
when I began my career, which is over 25 years
Yeah.
ago, I had a big class.
Yes.
And it dwindled to literally I think maybe 9 students,
Yeah.
6 students by the
Yeah.
end, by the time
Yeah.
I was leaving.
Yeah.
In 25 years, yes, from 20 odd students to 30
Yes,
students to...
Yes. So it's curriculum
5,
dependent
6.
also. I mean, you have IB now. So what I know of IB system is that, it teaches you to think from different perspectives. So it is teaching you to think more deeply about matters. So you look at a topic, you can look at it from a science lens of science, you can look at it from the lens of humanities, a social science, So that is actually a curriculum which perhaps allows you. But I think in that it also depends on how good the teachers are who are imparting the curriculum.
Absolutely. That's true.
so
That's true. But by and large, I think students will gravitate towards subjects which are a short A star.
Yes.
As opposed to something which may give them a B.
Yes.
Even if they've enjoyed it and they've...
Yes. So that's a general trend.
That's a
which you
general
see.
trend.
Yeah.
So AI is rapidly
Yeah.
changing how knowledge is created and how it's used, right? How should schools rethink learning? How do we distinguish helpful tools from dependency?
I think you need to, again, as I said, what is the objective? Reiterating what I just said a couple of minutes ago, of a good education. It is, your sharpening a certain type of skills, helping students develop those. We're talking about analytical skills, ability to write, ability to express your ideas, ability to look at different phenomena in the world, different situations from different perspectives, all that. And the second, which perhaps more important part, character development. So if these are the two major objectives of a good school and also college undergraduate education, then you need to ask the question, well, how is technology aiding that? Okay, so perhaps in terms of those skills, it can aid it. Okay, but clearly, I mean, in terms of character development, emotional intelligence, there's much more than just technology. It's the socialization, it's the mentorship, it's the role of the teacher, it's the broader curriculum of a particular school or a college, which plays a role. Okay? So if technology is impairing your cognitive skills, if it is helping you not to think, okay, it's helping you to write so you don't develop your individual expression. It doesn't allow you to read extensively, you know, so you become narrow in terms of your perspective. So it's actually impairing your cognitive abilities. And tomorrow, you know, if you go into the labor market, you know, so where those things are required, so that complementary role with technology and that resultant sort of high productivity is not going to be that much.
Yes.
Okay, so for you to use technology, at least you have to have these basic fundamental skills. So one has to be very careful, especially at the primary and the secondary level, as to how do you integrate technology. Making sure that you should have in mind that these are the clear objectives and making sure that those cognitive abilities are not impaired for life.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's the...
Now, yeah, with chat GPT and all, one does feel that students are relying more on chat GPT working for them.
Yes.
And so there are these moral and ethical implications, and it is a challenge, I think. As a teacher, I feel that...
Even, I mean, if you're using chat GPT, you know, as... in whether you're at university, you know, you need that ability to prompt it well, to frame questions well.
Yes.
So if that is not developed, you know, at when you're in school, when you're 5 or 6 in primary and secondary level, so your ability to use that technology is also going to be fairly limited.
Correct.
Know? So I think while, yes, there's a want to adopt technology, you know, it's something new, it's changing rapidly, very, very fast. And, you know, we can't really see or say which direction it's going to take. But I think one has to be a bit cautious and a bit circumspect. You know, so you need to have a policy, you need to draw certain parameters. Of course, as an aid for teachers, it's great, you know, as a teaching assistant tool.
Yes.
You know, but it can never replace a teacher, a good teacher. And it has to be very, very carefully employed, especially at the primary, secondary level where you want those skills to develop.
Absolutely. That's a good point. So that was my next question, that does technology diminish or elevate the role of the teacher? And you said that it really doesn't. You think it doesn't?
Of course. I mean, and the other big objective in terms of character and personality development, I mean, is ChatGPT going to help you do that? Clearly not. Okay. So it has to be, you learn from your peers, you know, from interaction, socialization, and teachers play a fundamental role. They're your mentors. You know?
Bilkul.
So, I mean, that role of a teacher, that human relationship is integral. I mean, you know, we don't want to become robotic and just cogs in the wheels, and we are human beings. So while we want us to be productive, you know, agents in society, we also want us to be good human beings.
Yes.
You know, who have a deep sense of what their social responsibilities are, who are good citizens, who have a broader world perspective, who are moral, ethical, honest. That dimension comes from the human interaction, comes from good teachers.
Yes.
And within a broadly well-structured curriculum in a school.
Yeah, that's the key word here is a good teacher. Because you have teachers and then you have good teachers.
Yes.
So how should professional development evolve to equip educators for this this rapidly changing landscape?
I think it's critical. So I'll give you an example.
Yes.
So since I joined Aitchison College, it's been a year and a half. Now and this is not a comment about the school, but comment by and large, in terms of sort of school level teaching in Pakistan. There's a variation in quality. There's a big variation in quality. And primarily the reason behind that is that the bar to enter school teaching is rather low compared to your good universities. Okay? So, you have a bachelor's or a master's from some university, and, unfortunately, school teaching is not top of the pecking order for a lot of people.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is sad, because you need people to self-select themselves into teaching, because then your heart and soul is going to be it. So that generates a large variation. So, and you don't have any programs, at least in the country, which are solid programs in terms of teacher training. There's some, but they're few and far between.
Yes.
Okay, so you used to have, master's program and, teacher training programs and so on. But over the years, especially the public sector ones, the quality has really denuded. It has really gone down. So in the absence of that, so what does a school like Aitchison do? So we put up a teaching and learning center. It's now a Cambridge recognized center. We have Cambridge PDQ professional development programs. We also have curated teacher training programs where teachers meet across different schools. They discuss literature on pedagogy, on curriculum, whatever research is out there in terms of in teaching, so get them intellectually excited about broadly teaching and also about their subject matter and improve their quality as teachers. So I think that is extremely important, and that's where technology also comes. So with AI and all that, that's a structured way of having that discussion or debate within the school environment and across schools of how do we actually assimilate technology in the classroom. How is it an aid to the teacher? How is it an aid to the curriculum? And how do we circumscribe it, especially for the students, so it does not harm them, it helps them.
Yes.
So absolutely. So, and collaboration between schools and universities here is essential.
It is, absolutely.
So while, the same student is going to university, so we need to talk to one another. So we need to have constant conversations. So the Teaching Learning Center is a platform for continuous sort of not just teacher development, but also curriculum research, and a platform where this conversation happens. So it's not just limited to Aitchison, it's also for other schools.
That's a fantastic initiative. Yeah. But tell me, so this is something I always feel that, we conduct all kinds of professional development workshops. But are we really going back to see, are they being implemented? And if so, what's happening? What's working and what is not working?
Yeah.
So I feel that's a weak point. Yeah. What I've noticed and seen in my career, that, there's nobody comes back to check really.
Yeah. So that's
or to collect data,
point.
And collect data and then base your decisions based on what the data that has been collected post the training.
Yes, so that's why that was the thought of having an in-house facility. Because then the interaction is a continuous interaction.
Correct.
So the training is part of what a teacher does in the school. Okay, but at the same time you have observations. And it's not observe to fire, ostensibly. It's observe to grow. So you observe and you help them if they have issues, whether it's in class management or any pedagogical issues, those are addressed. And you're also monitoring progress and effectiveness of that particular program on quality. And it's a medium to long term.
It is.
And these are also relatively difficult things to measure, especially in schools where you don't have student evaluations as one method. So, you can have peer observations, you can have sort of the teaching and learning center people observe them, or you can have external people do it, or the heads of school do it. But still, it's not a perfect science at all.
And I do feel student voice is extremely important. So getting their perspective in is extremely important.
Absolutely.
We feel that, students may or may not, we feel just around primary schools or secondary schools, the children don't know, but they know. And even a grade 1 student will tell you things which are very,
who the good teachers are, who their favorite teacher
Absolutely.
is. So there are ways by which you can get that information, and to an extent one knows it. In universities, across departments, that these are the star teachers. Enrollment, it's they always have full classes. So, student evaluation is something which needs to be taken very seriously. In schools, it's a challenge. There can be maybe indirect ways by which you can get that information, from students and, But at university, at least, I taught for 28 years, so for us it was critical, to look at how good we were doing and to read the comments especially.
And that's the only way to grow, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And you keep growing. Your learning never stops. So as a teacher, you keep learning, and that should be the attitude.
Yes.
And that attitude comes if you're actually somebody who's vested in the profession,
Yes.
vested in the life of an academic or a teacher.
Yes. That's what I said. Good teaching and then just teaching.
Yeah,
the difference
good
between
And that's why, it's so important for you to actually, and for schools and colleges, to try and get teachers who want to teach as it's the first choice. So we started a trainee teacher program at Aitchison College. Because, given this issue of variation in quality, and generally you have teachers who come with experiences, but there are those with 5-10 years in other schools. So how do you make it attractive for, young graduates from good universities to opt for the teaching profession? Okay, we did that very effectively at LUMS. It took us around 30-40 years. I'm sure it can be done in a school. So, it's about giving them career trajectories, a future,
Yes.
a career progression, give them facilities, good pay, all that. So if they see professional growth, so you'll be able to attract people. And the advantage of that is that these are people with solid, undergraduate, so very good subject knowledge, which is the first prerequisite of a good teacher. And secondly, they have a lot of potential to develop, and it's their first choice. Okay, so you don't have somebody who didn't want to be in the classroom who's now pushed into the classroom because of other circumstances. You have people who actually wanted to teach who can. So
Yes. Yeah, so but proper incentives, like you said, have to be given to teachers, because
Yeah.
I feel, yes, it's so important to have fabulous teachers at the university level, or even most young graduates will gravitate towards teaching A
Yes,
levels
yes.
because the salary is higher.
Yes.
Right? But जैसे आपने भी कहा that हमारे जो है grade 1 to 8 is you need very good, very solid teachers teaching students at that time. Because
Absolutely.
you're developing as a human being also at that time.
Foundation is
Foundation,
important. And
yeah.
I'll tell you what, so again, this is perhaps because coming from a university, I could do the comparison. So in universities, you have clear career trajectories.
Yes.
The good universities have tenure track positions. So you do a PhD, then you're on sort of a tenure track for 6-7 years, effectively on probation. Okay, and then you become an associate professor and then a professor. And of course, then you have the administrative positions on the side. But the true value for a teacher and academic is the career trajectory, okay, which is from assistant to a full professor.
Yes.
Okay. In schools, at least in Pakistan, at least what I discovered or found is that there are no career trajectories for teachers.
None. Yes.
So your quality as a teacher is not really recognized or remunerated as it should be. So what happens is whatever career trajectory is an administrative career trajectory, and that is terribly limited. I mean, how many heads of department are you going to have, or how many subject coordinators you're going to have?
Yes.
So growth is in that sense. So it's a different skill which you're sort of compensating or you're valuing. What about teaching? So again, at Aitchison College, we're instituting it now. So we're developing career progressions for teachers. So you start, if you have no experience, you start as trainee teachers, then you become a beginner teacher, then a proficient lead, master or head teacher. So teaching as a craft is then evaluated, properly assessed and remunerated. Okay. So, and yes, of course, administration plays a role, but it feeds into your trajectory growth as a teacher. So that is what we're trying to do there. And that addresses your question or comment about primary school teachers. And so here the career progression within teaching is generally thought to be that, okay, you start in sort of a primary school or secondary school and you graduate towards O and A level teaching where the salaries are higher. Now that's also deeply problematic. Ideally you would like very, very good teachers who specialize maybe perhaps in primary level to stay in primary. And the reason why you have this sort of problematic progression is because you don't have career trajectories. Now, if you have career trajectories for primary, from sort of middle school and for higher school, senior school. So Aitchison has all the 3 schools. So then you won't have that. You're in, so somebody who is in junior school or primary level, they can see growth within that. They can be at the same level after, say, 10 or 15 years of excellent teaching and contribution and service as somebody who's in high or senior school. Okay, so this sort of inequity across different levels is also addressed. So we're doing it at Aitchison. Let's hope it's a success. But
it's wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
And so, I was just going back to teaching again. So a friend of mine is working in a private school in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And so she says that all the leadership of the school gets a certain sum every year, and they need to invest in their own learning. And so show them that we've taken this course or that course and we've learned this, and then to implement it or bring it back to the school.
Yeah.
So I wish schools would do that more often.
Yes.
Find courses, online courses where teachers are kept up to date, because a lot of the teachers, they don't know what's happening beyond what
absolutely.
you give them. So आपने जो document दे दिया वो उन्होंने पढ़ लिया, and that's that.
Well, cool. So we are now doing it. So in our career trajectory assessment of a teacher moving from one stage to another, professional development is part of it. So whatever they do, whether they do it through the Teaching and Learning Center or outside, is all going to be recognized. Okay, and it's going to help them progress as a teacher.
Okay,
so
great.
That's,
so I've spent more time on this because I personally feel that, even more important than pupil learning is teacher learning.
Yeah.
So that's why, I spent a little bit more time on teachers and their
Absolutely.
training.
And, I tell you, I mean, I've been making the case, to people, to stakeholders, is that if you want to be student-centric, whether you be a school, whether you be a college, university, you need to be faculty or teacher-centric.
Oh, yes.
As soon as you transform the quality of a teacher, you're not going to have 100% phenomenal teachers anywhere, even in top universities, but still, you need to reduce variation. Okay, so at least the top and the bottom, the quality difference should not be that stark or that not be that much. Okay?
Agreed. Yes.
And at least have a sizable number who are actually inspirational teachers, who inspire you and transform you. And it's not just the challenges that, and for schools and colleges, it's not just inspiration in the classroom, it's outside, because you don't cease to be a teacher when you step out. So your role as a mentor, so what sort of personality you have, all those things count, because end of the day, if the objective is not just the skills, but it's also character development, so it makes the job even harder.
Yeah, correct. So let's move to the next segment, which is we're looking at, so many students perform well academically, we've established that. But yet, employers often highlight skill gaps.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, where does the disconnect lie between school education, higher studies, and then the job market?
So these are just some thoughts. I think greater connection between industry and college or university is perhaps important, sharing of information. But just, unless you go for something which is STEM-oriented, or perhaps accounting or a particular type of skill, and it depends how good that skill is, you learn it and how good then you use it. In other, humanities, social sciences, where you're taught how to think, your learning curve is going to be very steep. So you come from a good place, a good college or university, whatever you do, even if you do history or philosophy or whatever, the fact that they teach you these basic skills of analytical thinking, critical thinking, writing, ability to articulate ideas, you're hardworking, all that, you're open to ideas, you're going to have a steep learning curve. So wherever you're going to go in the job market, the chances are you're going to do well. And of course, we're talking about cognitive skills, emotional intelligence, and also your character, your personality, how do you interact with other people.
Yes.
So I think that entire package of what we initially said was a good education, if you're actually doing that, then this gap between industry or the workplace is not going to be that much. So, you're going to eventually have students who do perform well when they go into the real world, because they'll be ethical, they'll be honest, and in terms of their skill sets, cognitive abilities, those also are going to be very sharp.
Yeah. So do you think our students, Pakistani students, are they being trained to compete globally?
I think a very small minority. These are just figures. Those who do CIEs or A-levels, this such a low number, really. I mean, if you look at Pakistan, we have certain first-order problems.
Yes.
And think about it. We have around 30 to 35 million children between the age of 5 or 6 and 16 who are out of school.
Yes.
Girls and boys. We suffer from learning poverty. That
yeah.
is 70% of, children who are at the age of 10, they can't do a basic math problem. They can't write a sentence in any language, even their vernacular language. Okay, so, that is the problem. We've 78 years, 80 years of independence till date. What's the literacy rate? Official figures are what? 50%. So those who are literate, you look at the quality of the learning they're getting. So those are the real first-order problems we're facing. And then you couple it with the health issues. The fact that 35-40% suffer from malnutrition. There's stunting and there's wasting of a sizable proportion of kids between the age of 5 and 16, which is impairing them physically and also cognitively. So that's your future. That's 15, 20 years ahead. These boys and girls are going to go into the job market. So, forget about the global market. So, within the country, how productive are these going to be? And whether they will be able to be absorbed in the labor market or be productive. So I think that is the real problem. Yes, we're talking about elite private sector institute. That's a very, very small percentage.
That's what I was just going to
And
say.
they generally, so yes, they do well, they go abroad, they have access, all that. But I mean, for the transformation of the country, development of the country, it has to be the average boy or a girl in Pakistan. Their quality of education has to improve.
Yes.
And learning has to improve.
So, what gives you hope for the future of our students?
Look, so we need to address these problems seriously. And in any country, whether that be the US or Europe, developed countries, even Japan, China, the problem of education was solved by the public sector. The private sector fills gaps. Okay, they provide a service. So here, unfortunately, in our country, it's a public sector failure.
Yes.
It's a constitutional right of any child in Pakistan to get 12 years of good education. So I think that is where the failure is. So you have a proliferation of private schools in the country where there's a large variation in quality. And even though, your public schools teachers have decent salaries, but the quality is really, really suspect. And hence a lot of parents in the want or in this impression that they're going to get some quality in private schools send their kids there. But there too, across Pakistan, the quality is rather suspect.
Yes.
So I think it's not consistent. So if the direction, changes and we recognize this problem, the educational and the health problem, then of course, I mean, you can turn this large, fastest growing population in South Asia into, an asset. So, it is a bane, but it can be a boon for the country, so that could be really transformative.
Yes.
And if you look at the development histories, in the 20th century, post-Second World War of countries which have been able to break the shackles of poverty and develop, it's been done through education and mass education. So that's how you climb the value chains. That's how you remain globally competitive. And now if you throw in the mix of technology, AI, so you have the tools, okay, in perhaps the school where you don't have proper teaching, proper resources, to bridge those gaps. Okay, so you have this free resource out there or low-cost resource out there which can be utilized very effectively in giving them good education. But, the intention has to be there and that scale has to be there. And for those who are actually graduating from schools and universities, if you look at the opportunities with which this world of technology is giving. They can sit in their home, even if they don't have a formal job, and somebody is creative, has some coding skill or knows how to do software or whatever, and is adept in terms of use of AI and technology, they have a world market out there.
Right.
Okay, so they don't need land as an asset. They don't need any other physical capital asset. All they need is human capital, good education, maybe a good connectivity, internet connection, and a laptop, and they can sell their ideas. You have a marketplace of ideas. So yes, that is what gives us hope. But the first order condition or first order problem, the educational and health problem, has to be recognized.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much, Dr. Turab. Thank you
Most
for sharing your insights. You've given us so much to consider about the purpose of education in a very rapidly changing world. So we hope this conversation prompts us to rethink how we define success
Yes.
and how we prepare students for what lies ahead. Thank you so much.
Most welcome. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Please subscribe so you never miss a podcast and comment below who you would like to see next.